Cheers, guys. Epix911, welcome to the Elitist Geek VR news for Friday, October 14th, 2016. What night is it, Exiting?
Friday to you, boys and girls.
Yeah.
Friday.
Gaming Friday indeed. And speaking of gaming, yeah, there was not much gaming going on here. We ended up losing some power. Looks like we may lose power again. Hopefully not until tomorrow. Apparently some remnants of a typhoon somewhere in the South Pacific that decided to whirl around and throw its offshoot at us. So I've unpacked the Sony PlayStation. I got it hooked up. I have not tried the Sony PlayStation VR yet, but that is definitely in the books for tonight, as is the gaming video, as is, of course, this news video. So let's dive right into VR, guys, and start with something very dark and somber. There is a 360 video project, and it's a short movie called Mule. And it was created by Dark Corner Studios. Now, these guys bill themselves as the darkest part of virtual reality. And one of the Upload VR authors, he was at the recent VR on the Lot conference and tried it out. So what they made people do during this is literally sit in a coffin, put on the HMD, and live the experience. Now, without too many spoilers, I'm not sure if this will ever be released anyways. I just mention it because it could be good for certain purposes, but let's explain. So you basically are looking through a drug addict's eyes. And you're in a hotel, there's a couple of different scenes. Anyways, eventually you die from an overdose. There's a bit of afterlife and your burial and autopsy. You literally live through all of those experiences through the eyes, I guess the corpse eventually, of this person. And apparently, yeah, it was very dark, very real, and very freaking disturbing, according to the author. But the reason I mention this is one of the areas that we haven't really talked about. I mean, I suppose we have in terms of overcoming phobias, right? But you could also use this for treatments, I'm sure. Now, I'm no psychology major, definitely no shrink, but I can see uses in that area, however they choose to do that. This is a perfect example. I mean, if you put this on a couple of kids' heads, you know, it might be enough to scare people. I'm not a huge proponent of the scare them straight, right? But it's an avenue. For some kids, it did work, right? Others, probably like myself, it wouldn't have made much difference. But yeah, that is Mule, and no mention on whether they're going to release that. Beyond, of course, showing it at conferences. Next up, impressions on Valve's new controller prototype from Cloudhead's Denny Unger. Now, Kent Bye, who does some fantastic podcasts over at Roadtovr, I really enjoy his podcasts. He had an interview with Denny and basically got to ask him quite a bit about the controller. Now, there were certain things Denny couldn't get into, for reasons of confidentiality, obviously. But he was able to confirm some things and discuss some other things that we didn't know. Namely, what I liked is it took them as a development company, because they were approached to create a demo for this prototype controller. And he said it took them a little while to get used to the feeling that this is a controller that you didn't need to exert a death grip on, right? And controllers vary a lot, but one thing with most controllers is you constantly hold them. With this one, because of that strap design and the coming up over the palm, you can actually relax your grip. That brings us to the second point, the fact that you literally start with a neutral open hand grip, and in games, when you grab something, let's say it's the hilt of a gun, you then come into contact with the controller waiting there for you. So it's a lot more of a natural feeling from open hand to object as you close your hand. That was another point that he noted. He also liked the capacitive feedback. So touching it different ways produce different effects. And as someone who has used both the touch controllers, from a development point of view, and the Vive wands, he felt it was really kind of an evolution of the VR controller. Starting with, of course, the Vive wand. And I don't think too many people will disagree that the touch, is a step closer in the direction of being a better controller than the Vive one, right? Granted, they had more time as well, but whatever the reason, it's an evolution on the Vive wand, in my opinion, and the opinion of some others. This prototype really looks to be a step up even from the touch, like a step further in that direction where you're not having to hold on to the controller. You can have open hands, close, capacitive feedback, haptic feedback, all on a device that you don't have to hold in a death grip. And that's the part that ultimately probably appealed to me the most. And it would take some getting used to, because literally most of us, since young, our brains have been trained to hold the gamepad, the joystick, the racing wheel, whatever it is, has been a part of our reality as long as gaming has been around. So it'll be neat to see if that's a feature that they retain, or if they find during their pilot testing and development phases that ultimately that won't work in the long run. So it'll be neat to see where they go with that. Also in the news, Oculus buys a low-power LED display company. The company's called InfiniLED, and what they do is create low power, and they call them inorganic LEDs. I'm not sure what that actually means. They didn't get into the technology beyond calling it inorganic, but the idea is that these offer much better power efficiencies in the order of 20 to 40 times the power efficiency of OLEDs and LCDs, etc. And less power, so more efficient, less, longer lasting. And yeah, that's a curious acquisition to make, but makes sense. And one thing they pointed out in the article, and why I think this is a step in the right direction for Oculus as a company, is their device itself was, very low powered compared to what other technologies were out there when it came around. So to reach out to another company that has done something similar, but to a larger degree, makes sense. It's a natural step for Oculus. Next up, Sony Playstation VR sales. Now this is an interesting one. We don't have exact numbers, just like we don't for the Rift and the Vive. What we can say is, according to European Sony president Jim Ryan, and he's head of Interactive Entertainment Europe, and he stated on CNBC, so he was on the show being interviewed, that sales globally are in the many hundreds of thousands. So what could you interpret many hundreds of thousands as? Somewhere between 300 and 500,000? Because if it was 500,000 or more, you'd probably say in excess of 500,000. So that would be my best guess is 300 to 400, 450, somewhere in that range, which is not bad for first day sales. Again, considering some of the most famous consoles, peripherals in history, and how they sold over time, right? The one thing I will mention, though, and I was at 2 stores today looking for Sony PlayStation VR games. I'm just curious what they had on the shelf. Stopped at a Best Buy, and I went to the Walmart after, and both had the exact same title lineup. And I'm curious if any of you in the US or maybe in the UK or anywhere else in the world, Asia, Europe, if you noticed the titles on display as VR titles. So what we had here was Riggs, Batman Arkham VR, the story one, of course I'm drawing a blank on that, not Journey. Anyways, it was another one. The one I was really looking for was Res Infinite and Battlezone. Neither of those were there. But it wasn't necessarily the game. Other than Riggs, none of the other ones really appealed to me. Oh, sorry, the other one was Drive Club. That was the other game. That one potentially for me, but I might do that digitally. So I'm going to see what's available digitally and probably get Res Infinite that way. Yeah, but what have you guys noticed on the shelves, title-wise? But where I was going with that, both stores, while I was standing there looking at the titles, looking at the prices, for the different components that make up the two different bundles, I had families come by. And in Best Buy, it was a fellow with his two daughters and asked about VR. He had a couple of questions if I knew, and I said I did, answered those questions. And the enthusiasm just from him and his two girls was very obvious. This is something that they wanted. And it was nice to see that, because it's really given me the confidence that, look, there is an untapped market for Sony PlayStation VR, a market that maybe the Rift and the Vive didn't reach out to, right? Maybe they got them excited, but ultimately, for whatever reason, if it was maybe too much involved, cost, whatever the reason, they didn't make the plunge. But here with Sony PlayStation, they are contemplating the plunge. So that was nice to see. Another family, same thing, didn't chat with them at the Walmart store, but you could see they were looking. But the other point to mention is both had stock. So these things haven't flown off the shelves by any means. Sales have probably been very good. I don't think they're necessarily going to be disappointed, but isn't it nice for once to have supply chain actually freaking work, Want to buy something and then be able to buy it. So I was definitely pleased that I was able to buy mine. Likewise, sure, it would have been great to have these sold out, but the fact that there is a proper supply chain is great. That tells me when these do sell, and they're going to sell a lot more towards the holidays, restocking that supply chain shouldn't be an issue for Sony. They should be able to keep pace. Also, some head scratchers. Batman Arkham, seeing that $30 Canadian when it's about an hour, that's tough. That's tough. You compare it to, hell, even just like an IMAX movie, you are watching double the time for half that price, right? You're involved in that experience. So, and then you compare it to Riggs. Riggs was $59. That's got dozens of hours of gameplay because of the multiplayer elements. But fair is to the buyer, right? So somebody might see that 29 and think that's an okay deal and really enjoy that 1 hour. Maybe it's the best hour of their life. I don't know. That's a possibility. The last thing I wanted to talk about is HTC opening a second round of Vive Accelerator Applications. Now, this is the program where they will fund VR initiatives, and that can be, far-ranging in terms of what the type of VR application these companies are working on. It just has to be virtual reality. They're probably not going to be announced publicly, just like, we didn't really get too many details on the companies that qualified in the first round, just that it's open again and that they'll even offer guidance. So it's not necessarily just monetary. And you can work with the Vive X team in one of 4 cities. And those cities are Taipei, San Francisco, Beijing, and Shenzhen. So both of those last ones obviously in China. And Taipei, Taiwan, San Francisco on the West Coast. So basically Pacific Rim is another way of looking at that. Nothing in Europe or the East Coast of North America. So nice to see that still going on, and hopefully that leads to even more innovation. That's it for the news, guys. I am so stoked to start playing with the PlayStation. I can't wait, so I'm going to get to that, but I will definitely get the gaming video out first before I do that, and this one online. As always, guys, cheers, and definitely catch you on the VR flip side.